Welcome to In the Seams, a podcast by Broken and Mended. And now your host, David Heflin.
Well, hello, I want to welcome you back to In the Seams, and I'm excited to have a guest today. Her name is Sarah Reid, and Sarah was connected to us through Shannon Kramer, and Shannon has been on this podcast before and also was one of our conference speakers last fall, which we'll be having another virtual conference soon, this coming fall, and so there'll be more details about that. But anyway, Shannon has been connected to this ministry through those ways, and we're very glad, Sarah, that she connected you to us. We're excited to get to talk to you today and just want to welcome you to the show.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be on here and for the opportunity to share my story, and hopefully it'll encourage others who are listening, whether, shortly after it's recorded or way in the future.
Yeah, and I'm sure that it will be an encouragement. And I've had an opportunity to kind of peruse some of your content on Instagram and on YouTube, looked at your podcast a little bit. And so we'll talk about all of that, these things that you're offering to connect with other people. But first of all, let's just learn, if we could, a little bit more about you and your story. Could you kind of tell us about your health journey, kind of when the problem started, and what did that eventually result in terms of diagnoses?
Yes, so I've actually struggled with my health pretty much all of my life. And then as I've gotten older, it kind of progressed, each year it got a little bit more. Certain symptoms would show up that seemed, quote unquote, random, but we now know they weren't. And so it took many, many years of going to specialists and doctors for different things. And unfortunately, they didn't know what they were. So I spent a long time not having any diagnoses. And then when I was 17, I got into the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota. And I spent about a week there getting different, tests done and stuff like that. And they finally were able to diagnose me with POTS and ME-CFS. And then later on, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia and hypermobile arthralgia. So it's just kind of been a very long journey. I'm 23 now. So just trying to figure out how to be 23 with these conditions that are, for me, unfortunately, can be disabling.
Okay, thank you. And so you said ME-CFS. Is that what you said a moment ago? Could you tell our audience and kind of what that stands for and what that is?
So ME-CFS stands for myalgic encephalomyelitis. It's a very complicated way to say my body doesn't properly give me the energy I need always, and it can also cause a lot of pain along with a lot of other random, symptoms and stuff. And it can be challenging. Some seasons it's worse than others. Some seasons it's better, but I don't always feel as rested. I can feel very fatigued. I can have pain deep in my bones because I also have fibromyalgia, but that pain is a little bit different. So, and physical exertion, things that people wouldn't often think of, like walking and standing, can trigger, extra fatigue more than just a cup of coffee or a nap can cure, although I do take my fair share of naps.
Okay, yeah, thank you for explaining that. And we have had people on the show that have had POTS and also fibromyalgia, so I think people are a little familiar with that, but it's always good, I think, for people who don't know to be kind of reminded. And so I appreciate you doing that. And it's a lot of stuff that you're dealing with at a very young age. You said you were 23. Obviously, this happens at a really formative time in your life, and like you said, all your life, and then at 17 you get these diagnoses. And so I want to just ask how that has really impacted the trajectory of your life. Like how have these conditions kind of changed the path you wanted to go on or had hoped you would be able to go on?
Oh my goodness, it's changed it in so many ways because we went so long without being able to find answers that I just kind of assumed one day they would say, here's what you have, here's, a magic pill, and then you'll feel better. So there was always that thing in the back of my mind that was like, eventually I'm going to get completely better. And not that that can't happen in the future, but just as a teen, I thought that I was going to just one day the doctor would be like, this is what you have, and give me something and I would feel better. And so I had all these plans of like, when I do get better, this is what I'm going to do in college, this is what I'm going to do in my early 20s. And though now to be in my early 20s and it looks, completely different than what I thought it would be. And I had to, change my life. I can't drive myself. So that's very different for, someone who is a young adult, and I can't work or go to college. But I've tried my best to, that still resting so much and so much symptom management, but also, what can I do where I'm at? And for some seasons that's been bedbound and just breathing, and other seasons that's been, writing books or doing social media when I can. So it just has to look, different every moment and, in every season.
Sure. Well, I appreciate that perspective, and I think that's one that certainly goes beyond, most 23-year-olds, and obviously chronic illness, chronic pain could be something that causes us to have a more mature outlook, because you have to in order to survive and to make sense of your reality right now. But I certainly appreciate you kind of speaking about how you just have to adapt to whatever you can do at this particular time. I'm sure it was not easy to come to that realization. And so just wanted to ask you if you had to identify maybe a hardest part of your journey, and then also how did God meet you in that low point?
Oh my goodness. The hardest part. There's so many hard parts. I feel like it's kind of like an onion. You've got a lot of different layers that you have to unveil, and different emotions that you have to experience as they come up with different things. And so, just different milestones can be hard. Hitting 20 was, a bit difficult because you're no longer a teen. And then hitting 23, because it's a little bit more real than, 22 felt. And so each of those milestones you have to kind of comprehend, like, this is my reality right now, and it looks very different than the rest of the world. And or I guess I should say, there's a lot of people with health issues, a lot of different than the rest of the people I'm around and stuff, a lot of healthy people. And just kind of acknowledging that, like, man, my life looks so different than theirs because they're talking about their job interviews or their day at work. And I'm like, yeah, I just had my third nap. So, sometimes it can look very different. And so that's something that you have to process. And I think that can be hard because you want to rejoice for your friends and you want to be happy for them. But then you also, have that reality of, my personal life looks very different than theirs. So I think that can be hard. But what's helped me is my relationship with the Lord, and there's a season for everything. Ecclesiastes talks about that, which it's a lot easier to read that in Ecclesiastes than to apply it to your own life. But just realizing that there really is a season for everything. And right now my life doesn't look like others, and this is the season I'm in, and I can acknowledge that that's frustrating, but I can also acknowledge that there's still the Lord's grace and goodness even in the season that I'm in now. And I process the hard emotions, but I also try to look for the positive and the joy.
Yeah, appreciate you pointing that out. And you mentioned the positive, and I know you have kind of a play on that word for a lot of your social media and other platforms, Potsitive.
Yeah.
So I thought that's pretty clever, and also telling of the perspective you're trying to approach it at. So I was just kind of curious if your relationship with God has been something that's been pretty steady throughout this, or is it something that you really had to wrestle with? And I'm sure it's different at different stages along the way, but kind of how has your relationship with God been impacted or been challenged during this time?
I feel like it's definitely, like, I've drawn closer to the Lord in this. I grew up in the church and I had that perspective, which I'm very thankful for, but I didn't really have a relationship or know God for myself until I was 17. So a few months before I actually got diagnosed. I became a Christ follower, as I like to say, because I knew Christ, but I didn't necessarily follow him like I do now. And that was a lot to wrestle with, because I thought becoming a Christian, a true Christ follower, was what God wanted. And then when I went to the Mayo Clinic, he was going to heal me there or give me this magic answer. And so I had to kind of be like, well, I thought that all this was just for me to know you, and now that I know you, you can take all the bad away. But that wasn't his plan. So just kind of, even if I don't understand, and just trying to trust him. And I love the Psalms, because especially the ones that David wrote, because he's so real for all of them, because he's always like, woe is me. And I feel that, and sometimes it's very harsh and it's very difficult, reality is. But then you also see how David was always thanking God for things yet to come and seemed impossible, but he also, worshiped the Lord where he was at. And so I feel like just knowing that my emotions are not too much for God, so I can come to him and be like, what's going on? But then, I can also worship him and say, even if I don't understand, thank you. And when I am frustrated, help me, walk through this, help me process this.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you bring up the Psalms, and particularly these Psalms of Lament, many of them attributed to David, of course, and being able to be real with God, and be real with God while still having hope. Both of those, you don't have to give up one for the other. I think some people feel like they've got to, if they're going to really tell God how they feel, they're somehow betraying the hope they have, or they think that because they have such great hope, that means they can't really be honest about maybe the depth of their struggles and their emotions. And the Psalms really clarify that for us. And we talk a lot about lament here on this show, because we think it's important that we be real with God, at the same time recognizing that God will meet us in that moment, as he did David and the other examples that we have from Scripture of people who have lamented. Andre's put in our producer a scripture for us to consider here from Psalm. So Psalm 73:26, my flesh and my heart may fall, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. That's a beautiful psalm. And so, yeah, you can draw a lot of encouragement, from those sources in Scripture. What about the people around you? You mentioned friends. Of course, you do have a situation where, like you said, your life is very different than your friends, and that can be hard. It can be hard. It can be isolating even. But have you found some support around you that has been helpful in either your family or friends?
Oh, yes. I'm very thankful at this point in my life. I have a huge support system. My family is amazing, and my mom is, she's my biggest cheerleader, and I have to use a wheelchair when I go shopping, so we will go shopping together, and she'll get my wheelchair in and out of the car. And then my dad, he's amazing too, and works really hard. And so I'm thankful to have two amazing parents, and then just beyond that, siblings and sister-in-laws that are really supportive. And then I do have friends who are amazing, and church family, so I'm just surrounded by people that, even if they might not understand completely chronic illness, if they don't have it, they still are compassionate and loving towards me, and careful to check on me and stuff like that. So I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, that is something to be grateful for, because certainly not everyone has that. And so I'm glad that you can appreciate that blessing. I too, and I feel like in my own, and I've said this before on this show before, but I'm very blessed in terms of my support system, my family, my friends. And like you said, maybe some people who can't understand exactly what it's like, but yet they try to understand, and they try to show support whether they can understand or not. And we have so many people that are not in that situation that we deal with in Broken and Mended, with people with chronic pain and chronic illness. And I think that's part of the reason why we try to provide some level of community for people that don't have that. And so a lot of people involved in Broken and Mended do have that. And so it's just kind of an additional level of support. But for some people, it really becomes one of their primary ways of finding support, and to be able to connect with people who are going through similar things. And I know that you really have a heart for people who are going through similar things, because your story has turned into one to where you're trying to use what you've been through as a way to acknowledge what others have been through and to be able to bless them. And I know you have a lot of different ways. And I heard in one place, maybe it was on your podcast trailer or something, but you talk about wanting to reach out especially to other teens and young adults. And by the way, you don't know this about me, but I have children that are not far from your age. My oldest son is 22, and I have a 20-year-old son who lives with one of the same diseases I have, ankylosing spondylitis, and I have a 17-year-old daughter who is living with Crohn's. And one of the things that has been hard for me as their parent was to see them having to deal with it at such a young age. It impacts just everything that they want to do. You kind of already, alluded to that, but it comes with some unique struggles, I think, at that age, because as you get older, maybe some people expect there are going to be more health problems. And a lot of times when you're dealing with younger people, sometimes they would not even think that could be possible or likely. And so people can feel what I'm getting at. It's a long way of me saying that, people can feel very isolated, I think, at your age and younger. And so I appreciate that you're particularly wanting to reach out to that group of people. You have your Instagram, your YouTube channel, podcast, and books. And we'll talk about your books here in just a moment. But you also, I've noticed in these highlight, you really emphasize the struggle of invisible illness. And that seems to be especially important to you. So I wanted to ask why that is. Why do you think that's such an important thing to emphasize? And what do you want people to know about invisible illness?
I think it's so important for me because my illnesses are so invisible. I actually didn't tell people about my health issues until I was 19. I was fortunate enough to be homeschooled, and so that was able to cater even more to keeping it a secret and not telling people. And then at 19, it got to the point where I became bedbound. So, of course, it was no longer something I could keep a secret. And I think people don't always understand how challenging it can be and how often and how much I can have symptoms and how much they affect my daily life because it's not something visible. When someone breaks their arm, of course, they're in a lot of pain. Of course, that's something that they have to heal from, but you see the cast, and so that's something where you look at them and you go, oh, they've hurt their arm, and so it's something that you can recognize. Whereas when you're dealing with something that's, wreaking havoc on the inside of your body, it's not something that you can see. And you can get close to people where my mom will look at me and she'll see my eyes glazing over, or she'll see my cheeks flushing from temperature dysregulation, or my legs turn purple from blood pooling, and she can see those things because she knows
Right.
me, and different people close to me can see that. But for the rest of the world, I look completely healthy, and so I think that's so important because it can be so invisible, it can be lonely and not something that people always understand because of the invisible side. And so I just kind of want to encourage, especially teens, because that's such a vital years, but then also young adults or really any age, just to feel more empowered that it is invisible, but that doesn't diminish, your struggle and the things you're going through and your symptoms, or your your worth isn't based on whether someone can see your symptoms or not, and your symptoms are still valid even if it's not seen.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think it's especially validating for people that are going through this and they feel very alone, or that there is no one else that can understand. But there are people out there who are going through similar things, and I think it's much more than what people realize. I was actually looking we're doing something a little different with Broken and Mended in the near future, where we're going to be helping families who have children with chronic illness. So they could be young children, but they could be older children and teenagers as well. And so I was looking a little bit at the occurrence of chronic illness and chronic health conditions with younger people. and it was pretty high. Like I was surprised that said something like 30 to 40% of all people that are children, which in this case was defined as under 18, have some kind of chronic condition. Now, those weren't all the same. One could be ADHD, for example, or dyslexia, or it could be, and then some were struggling with mental health issues. But I think the numbers were close to around 10% that have basically a kind of a life-limiting, life-altering type, chronic pain, chronic illness. That's still a lot of people. And I think a lot of times, and I'm reflecting a little bit back on my own kids when I say this, because I know that when my son was first going through this, that he did not realize that there were other people in the same youth group that were going through something similar until he shared what he was going through. And then that caused other people to open up. So really kudos to you for doing what you do, because people do need to know that they're not alone, that there are others who are going through similar things. And and Andres is posting some things here. He's doing live research for us, so I appreciate that. But approximately 1 in 5 children and adolescents worldwide experience chronic pain. Age and gender, chronic pain prevalence increases with age, peaking during adolescence, 15 to 16 years old. And then girls generally report a higher prevalence of chronic pain than boys. But they're still high for both boys and girls, like 26.4 for girls, 18.4% for boys. So that's a lot going on for people that are young, and a lot of times older people, especially, maybe because they forgot what it was like when they were young, they assume that nothing real serious could be happening there. Even though I didn't start struggling with my issues until I was, I think, 35 or so. I still had older people at church often tell me something like, well, wait till you get to my age. And it was kind of an invalidating thing, because it was saying that what I'm going through right now must not be serious because I'm not old enough. So if that was true for me at 35, I can only imagine how that attitude could be impactful for people, in your age group. I want to know a little bit more about the books you've written. And I know at least one, if not two. I know one has been published. Has the second one been published as well?
Yes,
okay,
it has.
So you published 2 books in a pretty short period of time. Is that correct?
Yeah, I published them both last kind of summer into fall.
Okay, wow, that's a lot. And so tell me a little bit about that, and tell our listeners a little bit about that, kind of what each of the books are about. And I'm always curious, by the way, when you're sharing this, what kind of prompted you or inspired you to write the book that you ended up writing?
So my first book is a little children's chapter book, and that one was inspired by my little nephew. Over a couple summers ago, he spent it with us a couple weeks, and he's just such a fun, kind kid, and he's goofy, but he's got a lot of where he's like, skeptical of things and very hesitant, and as any young kid has, he's got his own fears and stuff. And so I wanted a book where I just kind of normalized disabilities, but also had this cool story and included superheroes and stuff like that. And so I was telling my mom about it, and I was like, man, I just wish there was a book. And she goes, well, why don't you write one? And so I was like, okay. And then I started writing this book, and just kind of getting my ideas down and seeing if it was possible. And I ended up writing Leo and Charlotte, True Heroes. And it's about this little boy who's going into the 4th grade, and he's a little nervous and kind of got a lot of fears, but through the stories of, history stories that his history teacher tells, and through his parents, his neighbor, and his 3 best friends, he kind of learns to be brave and what that looks like without having superpowers. And his best friend, Charlotte, in the book has a disability, and she has to use arm crutches, so it kind of normalizes using disabilities and how they help her get around. It's not the focal point of the story, but it still normalizes it in such a fun, unique way. And so I love doing that. And then I also talk about the Americans with Disability Act, and kind of invisible illnesses and dynamic disabilities, just kind of sprinkled in there a little bit with it, where it's still part of the story, but not like super overbearing, just in a fun way.
Sure.
And then my second book that I published, is a Christian rom-com. It's a POTSy rom-com. The main character has POTS. It's called Salty for You, so it's a little play on words. And it's about this 26-year-old girl who has POTS, and she doesn't want love, she doesn't want a relationship, she's very happy in her own little world. And then this very handsome, very rugged guy comes into town, and they don't like each other at first, so it's, kind of enemies to lovers, but it's this whole story of where they're having to grow their relationship with the Lord, and they fall in love with each other. And so it's just a fun, very lighthearted, very Hallmark style romance, but it also shows her struggles, her invisible struggles with POTS, but kind of shows you the symptoms going on in her body when she's feeling excited or nervous. A lot of things that wouldn't normally be seen, I was able to write in the book, which was really cool and really fun and very healing in a way, because I get to put, part of myself in that book. So, and it's a happy ending. So, of course, who wouldn't love that?
Right. Yeah. So the first book, tell me the name again.
Leo and Charlotte, True Heroes.
Leo and Charlotte, True Heroes. What age group would you say that's targeted at? I know you said it was a children's book. Is it little kids or a little bit older?
So really anywhere between like 7 to 10, but younger could be read to, or older. So I mean, it's one I've had, my friends who are in their 60s, they've read it, but it also my nephews read it. So really for any age, but mainly, 7 to 10. The main characters are going into 4th grade, so kind of that age range.
Okay, and we will put, just for our listeners' sake, I'm saying this, we will put links to both your books in our show notes so people can find it real easily. And so your other rom-com, is that more for young adults? Is that kind of your target audience there? Is it somewhere else?
Yeah, that's mainly for young adults, so, kind of teens and to 20s, but also any age. It's very appropriate. Only like the married couple will kiss. So, but other than that, it never, goes beyond that. I wanted to keep it really clean as a book that my nieces could read as they got older, or, you'd feel comfortable reading in front of your grandma. So nothing, crazy. So just a very clean book for really any age.
Okay. That's good. Well, I'm excited that those are out there. Congratulations on getting that done.
Thank you.
I know it's a lot of work. That sounds like the kind of book, honestly, I would get for my daughter, my 17-year-old daughter, that she would enjoy that kind of book. And I appreciate that it's, appropriate, I wouldn't expect otherwise, but that's a good reassurance as well. And so, that sounds exciting. And so I want to ask you about some of these other platforms that you use, and it looks like some of them you're kind of getting off the ground. Like, I don't know, how many podcast episodes did you have recorded?
I think podcast. So kind of with all my social medias, as I'm sure you understand, with health issues, it can ebb and flow.
Yeah.
So with just if I have an idea, I just post. I upload an episode, and the same thing with YouTube. YouTube's mainly for streaming my conferences, but when I have the energy, I will upload like YouTube Shorts or a video or something.
So with the Be Potsitive, is that kind of the way people can most easily find you on whatever platform they're looking for?
Yes, so I'm Be Potsitive on like any podcasting platform. I think it's Be Potsitive with Sarah Reid is my podcasting. And then on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, it's Be Potsitive. And then I believe on TikTok, it's either Sarah Reid or Be Potsitive. I just started that. It's my first time downloading it, so I feel like a very grandma because I don't really know how to use it yet. So I'm still figuring that out.
Yeah, well, I definitely don't know how to use it, but I know some of our listeners, especially given the age group that you're connecting with, will certainly appreciate that you have a TikTok account. And, so what I could see would be challenging is you have so many different avenues of reaching out. And like you said, you have, limited energy depending on, what your health is like. What's your strategy? Is it just kind of in the moment, like you said, if something kind of pops in your mind, you'll do it? Or is there one that you're going to be focusing on more in the months to come? kind of what's your overall plan, I guess, for that?
I'm normally lately I've been more consistent on Instagram and TikTok, but I do try to post to Facebook and stuff. I normally just think of an idea and I'll upload it, and then I'll, save the video and upload it to the other platforms. But I've been doing something fun. I get infusions every week to help with my chronic illnesses. So I have Funky Fusion Fridays
Okay.
where I wear, thrifted outfits or just weird outfits that I just want to wear, and I'll record a video of my outfit that day, so normally I'll upload that, once a week. So that's something that has been consistent every Friday that will be posted to all my social medias.
Okay, so okay, good deal. Well, I'm glad there's so many different ways in which people can find you and connect to you. We'll try to put all those in the show notes as well, so people can find out what you have to offer. Well, I wanted to ask you one more, kind of just question, really kind of two parts to it. And, one is, are there other resources that have been helpful to you or you would want to point people toward? And then kind of the second part of that, just kind of any parting words you want to share as an encouragement to our listeners today.
Yeah, so I actually wrote it down, but there's this resource that it's a Christian devotional, specifically for chronic illnesses, that my mom actually gave me a couple years ago, and it's called Searching for Sea Glass by Karaj and then Platt. I'm not going to try to pronounce it because brain fog and I do struggle with dyslexia, but you can search that name up in Amazon and you could find her book, and it's such an encouraging book and really just helps you process those emotions. So I would say if you haven't looked it up, you should look it up. And I think something I would tell people is just your emotions are not too big for the Lord. You're allowed to feel all the emotions, and He doesn't get mad at those emotions, and He doesn't, get angry about those emotions. So just go to Him with whatever you're feeling, and He'll help you process those. Sometimes you might need to be angry or be frustrated, and that's okay. Just go to Him with all those emotions. And then, what was the last question you asked me? I forgot. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, and you might have already answered it, but it was basically, resources. And the second part was just kind of parting words of encouragement or anything you would want to say.
Oh, yeah. Resources. So another resource that I actually started doing 2 years ago, this will be my third year. I host a conference called the Be Potsitive Conference, and it will be hosted in Leesburg, Georgia. But if you are not able to travel or you live in other states or countries, you can watch it. It will be live streamed on my YouTube channel, and that will be August 8th, and ticket sales will be launched soon. So I'm really excited about that. But it'll have guest speakers of some of my medical team, and then a supporter/caregiver perspective. It'll have, food and photo booth, and just kind of a fun way to kind of connect people and make it where you feel a little less alone, but also raise awareness and help family and friends understand what those with POTS are going through.
That's great. And so how many times have you done this before?
This year will be my third
Wow.
year. So I've done it 2 complete times, and this will be my third time.
Yeah, that's ambitious, but that's great. And yeah, we'll certainly want to point people in that direction, because I think those moments of connection, encouragement, those moments again of finding out you're not alone are important. And so the more I hear about that kind of stuff happening, I'm encouraged by it. And so yeah, we'll make sure people know about that. We always talk a lot here about Diamonds Conference as well, just because we know that they do a lot, and also not just that they minister to people who are young adults, but they do happen to, pick up a lot in that age group, just because I think of the age this all started for Sarah Willoughby. And then of course we have our own conference that we're going to be having in October, which is basically, just where we have 3 speakers and a Q&A, and we had our first one last year, and so that was a big undertaking for us. That's why I was just kind of impressed that you've already done this for your third time coming up. But congratulations on that, and we'll make sure people can find.
Thank you.
Yeah,
it's definitely a lot with chronic illnesses. So my mom is amazing. I have an idea, and if I don't have the energy to complete it, she does it. And then one of my best friends, she is like in her 60s, but I always say that I'm the senior citizen friend, and she's like the go-getter. So she helps me plan it as well. So I'll have a crazy idea, and they will help me, accomplish it and stuff. So I'm very thankful to have a support system, because like you said, it really is so important to have these conferences and stuff, because just kind of getting the word out there, normalizing health issues, having a safe place we can talk about it is so important. And I think it really, you don't know like the impact that'll have on people in the future.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and I love the teamwork approach that you have there, and just I can relate to that, coming up with crazy ideas, but needing people around me to help accomplish it for sure. But it's good for us to lean into those crazy ideas, because that allows us to really step out there and trust that God is going to do something if we are just obedient with what He puts in front of us to do. And so obviously that's happening in your life. So again, we just thank you for being with us today and sharing some of your story and some of your resources. I know it's going to be a blessing to a lot of people.
Well, thank you so much for having me on here. I really appreciate it and love that I can share my story.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for listening, for our podcast audience, and we'll refer to you, as always, to our website to find out the latest of what's going on with Broken and Mended. So that's just brokenandmended.org, and from there you can find out many different ways that you can participate with our ministry, whether it be through support groups or utilization of some of our other resources. And certainly we always welcome, if you're in a position to be able to do so, a financial partnership, because that allows us to bring this message of hope, not just here in the States, but across the world. And if you get on brokenandmended.org, you'll see that quite a bit of it is focused overseas, particularly in Africa. And so we appreciate you just kind of checking out what we're doing. This podcast is just one branch or one outreach that we have amongst several. But it's always a pleasure to be able to bring these interviews to life, and to be able to bring these people to our listeners that can be a source of encouragement, and again, a source of really practical resources as well. So thank you for listening, and we look forward to having you back the next time.